everyone, and welcome back to the Content Mix. I'm Carlota Pico, your host for today's show, and I'm excited to introduce Gareth Crew, who is EMEA Social Media Manager at Garmin, and is also a journalist turned marketeer, which he'll tell us more about soon. Welcome, Gareth, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
The pleasure is ours. Okay, Gareth, so tell me a little bit about your background. You're a journalist turned marketeer?
Yes. Yeah, not a traditional route whatsoever. So back in the day, when I was very young, I've been involved in motorcycle racing for many, many years. My father started it. I've been going to bike races since I was 5 years old. So when I was starting to do my higher education, all I wanted to be was to be a professional racer. I didn't have any sort of talent in that sort of area. So those who can't, they write about it. So I started covering race meetings when I was about 18, 19 and started to become a journalist and a writer within that field. This is when print was still kind of happening. And as some of the roles that I worked on, I naturally came into working within editorial, then moving on to websites, etc. And I literally just fell into social media as it began. There was a role that was available, which was very much in the early days of stumble upon and putting stuff on Reddit, etc. And they needed basically someone with an editorial background to help get blogs on, to help start social channels. And I got that job. What was really interesting about this, where I didn't really have any marketing background or any knowledge, very quickly how much I really enjoyed the social media aspects of it and learned very quickly, where you could get that instant understanding and that instant response from everyone about stuff that was happening. And then it was just basically an industry that I grew up in. And then I just followed it on through my various different roles. And now I'm at Garmin today.
Okay. What a coincidence. I'm actually a journalist turned marketeer as well. I started off in broadcast journalism and then moved on into PR. And now I'm in the podcast world.
Excellent. So were you on print as well back in the good old days in PR print, or?
So I published PR campaigns in The Guardian, Die Welt, USA Today, some of the world's most mainstream media channels. But they were actually paid PR campaigns. So it was advertorials.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Cool.
The other side of journalism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The bit that kept us in it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Gareth, tell me a little bit about the moments that have shaped you as a marketing professional, like campaigns or projects that you like to zoom into.
Yes, of course. So when we were involved in social media, I think some of the things that shaped me very much at the start was about the amount of, I think the kind of rejection we had as being a brand trying to work in these different sort of social media spaces when they were in their infancy. And I think that was a really interesting point because we're kind of doing clickbait articles and stuff like that was kind of going through. And then what shaped me as wanting to be, a better marketeer and a better social media person was trying to figure out and understand what the actual audience would want and what would actually help capture the imagination of that audience, but also make sure that we can drive our objectives within that. And I've kind of taken that through on some various elements that I've done in the history of my work. Some of the specific stuff that comes to mind, we did a Valentine's Day campaign at an agency I was working at, where we sent out, we mixed up print and digital, where we sent out a load of Valentine's cards to prospects, and with a QR code, they're able to scan it, and then they got to automate it a specific landing page which said, will you be our Valentine? And it was a prospecting perspective, which was really fun, which probably the most fun and the most stressful thing I remember that day is that we were working with the Drum, UK and publication, and they wanted to do a PR piece for it that afternoon. And I knocked my water onto my laptop. So I remember having to write out the press release on my phone that evening and trying to get it off. I do remember that very much. And then another one, which was very close to my heart, was something when I worked within TUI, which for Crystal Ski, which is a ski brand. And this is very much with the same idea from a social media and objective perspective, where we had our objective was to obviously try to send people to all of these different resorts and get them to buy all their stuff. And it was a full holiday experience. So my idea that we came up with was to have, we had a competition where you put in from a BuzzFeed types way what sort of skier you were. So there was a load of sort of like questions about, it's 9 a.m. Are you on the slopes? Are you hungover? Or, do you want to do lots of miles, etc. Fairly simple metric like this. And then the output was to say that you are like, you were this skier, you were that skier, you're this type of skier. And then underneath that, you'd have a recommendation of which resort would be most interesting. So that was something that we were able to kind of re-promoted from a PR and social media perspective. And it absolutely exploded as a concept, which was great news. And I remember having a bet with my team that we were going to get like 5,000 entrants. I think we had like 15,000. And it went okay, yes. And then what this was able to be like a proper social media. It was social media led, which meant that we had a YouTube video that came out of this, which was a trailer for the following season. And it was a great way of how we were able to explain to our audience about the results. It wasn't a case that we were doing it because we needed to get more people to go to a specific destination. It was more about, we were able to say, well, if you like this, you could do that. So it kind of turned it on its head, which, I think, that was a good moment of how we could like incorporate social. And that was very much within the time the social was becoming much more the mainstream of like digital marketing, and how it wasn't a separate, it was kind of moving more into the center, and that's how it worked within TUI. I think closer to home, well, Garmin, I call Garmin home, is we had a massive launch beginning of last year in Spain, in Barcelona, which was for our luxury products, our mark products. And we did this great launch, which was on the track, and we brought everything together from an outdoor, from a social and PR event, and we brought it all together. And that was particularly special as well. So I think those sort of things have really kind of shaped me. I think I get a lot of energy from when we can do those really big social projects and where they can actually come off. I could list all the ones that haven't really done that as well, but how they kind of all kind of connect with what our objectives are. And then we've got more than just a social team working on it. I think when we're all together and we can all see it as a success, those are the things that really kind of drive me forward. And those are the things that I'd like to make.
Okay. Well, when something works, everything is great, right? Life is great. But what about challenges? What challenges have you had to overcome throughout your career?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think the main challenge that I have had to overcome, I'd say, is about being able to explain social media to people. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the big challenges that we have had, or we have as an industry, is that this is all accessible to everybody. And I think the challenge that we have and that we can face, and that I have definitely faced, is that everybody wants to do it and everyone thinks that they can do it. I have had challenges in the past about senior management going on to, say, like the profile pages and kind of looking at that as opposed to understanding how the newsfeed works, or challenges from a real sales-led activity. I think those are the challenges that can really damage social media. It's great to have a lot of enthusiasm within the company, but I think sometimes it is maybe social media, and it has done in the past, is just being considered as like a place that can be used for any other marketing. And we need to make sure that it abides by the specific rules.
Yeah.
I also think an interesting challenge that I've had about social media specifically is from an approval process, and from previous work that I've actually done. If it seems that sometimes companies are scared of any information that goes out has to be reviewed many times, and I think sometimes that can lose some of the authenticity of what social media is. If you're, say, working with an agency and it goes through many different levels of approval and refinement, you're losing that impact of what it can be. And it is just one post, it is just one story. I think social media's success lies in it being able to kind of react to different things.
Mm-hmm. On that note, how do you get senior management to buy into your ideas?
I think you you have to be very passionate, enthusiastic about it, but I really think that you have to be able to support it with objectives and KPIs. So, and I think it kind of depends with who you're actually speaking to, so you understand your audience. If you're talking to a senior marketeer, for instance, it's more about talking about the intricacies of, like, different performance and why this would work. But I think if you're speaking much in more general terms, it's kind of looking at the bottom line and kind of talking about, why this would be good for you. But then it's also about trying to allay their fears about what social media can do and can't do, and kind of highlight them, but also say, no, we'll be okay with this. It will perform okay. So I think in answer to that, you really want to kind of like give them why this would be successful for some people, not to worry about it. And for people who are much more passionate or interested in it, really list out those objectives, really list out those KPIs so they understand specifically why you're doing that.
Okay, so tie it back to business goals.
Absolutely. But I don't think, but you can still use, like, be really imaginative, and you can use all of, the expertise from that. But I think you just need to give them that piece of understanding about why you're actually doing it, because that's obviously the language that they're speaking.
Yeah. So basically be able to relate to your senior managers in the same way that you would want to relate to your audience as well.
I just thought that exactly same thing. I was just about to say that. So thank you for making it much more succinct.
Your minds think alike, Gareth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because it is an interesting point, is that as a marketeer, you are marketing to everybody. So you're marketing to your team, you're marketing to management, and then you are also marketing to your consumers as well. So I think that's actually a good analogy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gareth, why did you choose a career in social media? Out of everything that you could have done, why social media? What makes you passionate about it?
I think it's a really interesting field to be in. I really like the fact that it never actually stands still. I really like that it's always changing and you always have to learn about it. There's always new things coming out. There's always new platforms to do. There's always new ways of measuring stuff. And I think that's the bit that I'm really interested in. I feel that I can be quite creative within social media, and I think it allows you to do that. But completely on the other side of that, being able to understand and get really deep into having that instant response and all of those metrics come through, I think that's just as exciting, because you can do something, you can see if it's performing or not performing straight away, and then you can instantly make that decision, and then you can kind of move on, or you can refine. And I think that's the bit I like. I really think that social media at its core is good, even though a lot of people, it has bad press. I mean, some people do struggle with it, and there are completely legitimate reasons about that and about some of the challenges within social media. But I do think it is a movement for good, that you can connect with people, you can talk to people, you can learn different things. There's a democratization of information. People always have that. So I think that's a really good thing, and I think it's really cool that we can you can work with lots of different people across the world, and you can get all that instant feedback. So that's why I like social media. I think that's why it's really cool. But you have to be aware of the other side of it as well.
Absolutely. I've come across a lot of companies that have said that social media just isn't for them. Mainly B2B companies, although there are on LinkedIn, they're not on other social channels, like, for example, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Do you agree with that? Do you think social media is for every brand and everyone?
Yes, I do. I think, it is within the B2B space, and I have worked in B2B and in B2C. I would add that it's much easier in B2C for sure. It's, you can change your messaging, but ultimately, I believe that social media is a part of marketing, and you need to market to the areas where these people are. These people who are in B2B, they are engaging within, Facebook, on Instagram, or whatever, LinkedIn, especially on these channels. So it is definitely a route to get there. I think what you want to make sure of is like if that channel is right for them, and if the tone and what your expectations and objectives are to start with. You're not going to be able to sell internet security over a Facebook ad, but what you can do is that you can position your brand, your culture, have them at the top of the funnel so that they're actually aware and interested about your company, which means it can contribute to that bottom line as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, as marketeers, we are in the art of measuring society's pulse. So let's talk a little bit about COVID-19. What have you learned about business, people, and just marketing during these really unstable times?
It's been a very difficult time for everybody, I think. So I think what I have learned is that people seem to be looking out for connections with each other, and I think they want to have a connection with a company, and I think that they want to be able to feel that the company is supporting them. I think that's probably the most important part that we have learned specifically within Garmin. We have created content not for any other reason, but to kind of like help people through this time. If you would look on some of the stuff that we put on LinkedIn recently about how you can work out at home if you've been locked down, or how you can kind of understand about from some of the features that our products have, look after your breathing, keep yourself calm, keep yourself not being anxious, not provide any sort of medical advice, but also just trying to help people and to make sure that they feel calm and that we're their friend. And I think that's the thing that I have learned, is that if you have that, if you are that as a brand and you're able to provide that to people through COVID, they want that support and they want that help. I think people are kind of looking for answers as well.
Okay. So you're on social basically to be social.
Yeah, that's a fair way of saying it, absolutely. And I think we really you don't want to be seen as a company or a brand who wants to kind of profit from this at all. I think you need to be able to be social, and you need to be able to want to support people. And I think, Garmin has done a really good job with that as well, to be able to kind of help support people and provide that insight. So we can say, look, we can help you with this. If you've got a product, this is cool, this is what you can actually use.
Okay. You mentioned, and I have as well, Garmin several times throughout this interview. So let's give our audience a 30-second elevator pitch. What is Garmin?
Okay, so Garmin is, so essentially they produce a lot of different products which utilize GPS technology, easiest way to say it. Originally, they produced like navigation equipment for planes and for marine products, and then also for cars. Now, we as a company diversify in many areas and provide wrist watches, sport watches, fitness watches, and also stuff within for cycling. I have some. This isn't set up. This is always on my desk, by the way. So there's like a cycling computer here. There's radar. So this is a cool thing that you put on the back of your bike that tells you if people are behind you, which is quite fun. Yeah, it's a Varia radar. And then obviously their watch range as well. So a lot of these watches measure your heart rate. Let's have a look to see how I'm doing in my interview. Only 77, so it's nice and chill. And then you can measure like running, or you can do breathing exercises, and there's different sort of coaches and maps. It's like everything in one device.
Okay. Well, let's keep on talking about COVID-19 because obviously it's a subject that's affected brands worldwide and people as well. I'd like to read a quote by the CEO of Walt Disney. He said, start quote, that the heart and soul of a company is creativity and innovation, end quote. In light of the global pandemic, Gareth, in what ways has Garmin been creative and innovative this year?
So I think from an internal perspective, we've had to innovate a lot with how we create our creative, I think, because normally we're all kind of working together and we're kind of facing each other and we're talking to each other. So we have to be innovative as how we've been able to kind of discuss these things and work together. We've had to kind of understand and innovate within what we've been doing with like video chat and how we've been sharing content and how we've had to kind of be able to be comfortable with doing those sort of elements and just to work from our home. I think that's a point that we haven't been able to, that no one should kind of like ignore, that we've had to kind of innovate by working in the workspaces and kind of change that. I think from what I was touching on earlier, was the content that we have actually provided within from the COVID, when the COVID pandemic was at its peak, hopefully within March period. I think that was one of our great pieces of content that we produced with our series of events, and we were able to make sure that we could try and support our audience. After that, I think as we've gone, I think we've innovated with our creative to provide more products to kind of help support and encourage and inspire people. We've created some solar powered watches, which means that the idea, we had a lovely creative piece from the global team about doing what you love longer and for people to be outside. So I think we've been encouraging people to stay well, to stay happy, to stay healthy, whilst also helping support, some of the products that we actually want to actually sell as well. So I think those are the kind of those areas. I think we have tried to adapt to what's been happening outside, but also we've had to try and innovate with like using Teams and Zoom and everything else whilst we've been working together as well.
Obviously, COVID-19 hit Europe through different waves, right? Like Spain and Italy were hit first, then came the UK, the US was a few months afterwards. How did you address the challenges of your audience through your social media channels according to different stages that they were in during COVID-19?
It was a big challenge for us, I think. So within the structure that we have within Garmin, I speak to all of the local social media managers and marketing teams all the time. So it was very much as in understanding early what those challenges were. I mean, I can remember within February, within Spain and Italy, that it was very big news, and we had to kind of make sure that we could adjust what those objectives were that we had set. So the way that in normal times, we have a normal cadence of what sort of content and what sort of segments that we want to be pushing out. By segments, I mean like talk about running in the spring and talk about cycling. That was definitely a challenge, and it was a case of how we listened and we understood those specific areas. It wasn't that we wanted to be like completely autocratic about saying, well, no, this is the launch, this is what happened. But we had to be really sympathetic, and we used different sort of solutions and different sort of areas within our business. We're very lucky within Garmin that our watches and our products do a lot of different things. So we tried to kind of focus on different areas, but whilst continuing with those goals. We also kind of looked a lot at UGC content as well within social media, which gave us a bit more of a steer about what people were producing. So that was kind of how we had to manage that situation. And it was us being aware, and we had I talked to everybody a lot of the time, but we were having weekly Monday calls with everybody, just checking in, making sure everyone was all right. My colleague from the US was with me as well, just so that everyone felt aware and they could kind of talk about the temperature of what was happening between the different countries.
Okay, very interesting. So you were programming your campaigns according to local struggles.
Yeah, we had our overall objectives, which we were still running in countries that were able to do this. But obviously, for the local challenges that they had, we were moving them around a little bit to make sure that they could support that. And then we were providing help and support to them to make sure that they had as much support as they needed throughout that time as well. Yeah. Because it was anxiety for everybody throughout that time, I think.
And you were doing that in order to resonate better with your local audiences, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, for a couple of reasons. I think for the first thing, to make sure that a lot of the people within those different offices felt like, we understood what was happening, and, we were sympathetic to what was going on, but also, to resonate with those audience. I mean, it makes no sense for us to kind of be telling people in Spain and Italy at that time that they need to be outside running when you couldn't do that, really, unfortunately. So we had to basically show, again, back to my points when I was talking about social being authentic and everything, we needed to have that. And it was just all about us understanding those things for those local things. And that's what's really good about the countries as well. They have great local knowledge. They know what their audience wants, and they were giving us really great feedback in the local and the global campaigns to make sure that it all worked properly.
Okay. Well, let's move away from COVID-19 because obviously we
Yes,
have enough of that in our life already. Let's turn
absolutely.
towards your expertise in social media. So let's say you have a really small budget to spend on social media. What would you invest it in and why?
Oh, that's a very leading question. I think I would kind of want to understand which areas and what the business objectives are for. I know this is quite, but I think that you can never just say that you want to spend this amount of money on something and this is what you'll get. I think what I would like to do is to kind of see what would be the best performing thing that we could use for what we have. So, for instance, if we say like it's a B2C and we wanted to push out a new product, maybe we could kind of look at investing that money on an influencer or an ambassador, or maybe for if it was more B2B, we could look at like investing it into LinkedIn. I think the answer is it always depends on what actually it is and what our sort of objectives are. I don't think, and this is one of the fun things with social, it's not just one thing that fits all. That's kind of a dodge, really, but you know what I mean.
But then I'm gonna throw you another curveball. So how do you know what's gonna
Yes.
work and what's not going to work on social?
I think you can use your different experience, and I think you can use what you have done in the past. So I think you could say, so if you went completely generic, you could say, okay, well, let's just put some money onto the platforms that are the most popular and most successful. So I would probably say we could put some money into, say, Instagram stories, a bit of Instagram, perhaps TikTok, depending on the region, depending on the audience and what assets you have available, or perhaps just a bit on LinkedIn. So I think, yeah, those would be my go-to. I would probably stay away from, say, Twitter at the moment. I think it has its place definitely for what is doing this year, especially from the journalism perspective, because it's close to our hearts. But also, I think, that isn't where all the marketing is happening. So I would probably lean towards like the new stuff within Instagram, perhaps TikTok.
Okay. Let's say you have a new campaign that you want to launch in Spain and that your target audience are consumers from 25 to 35. How would you approach that on social media?
I think it's going to have to be very influencer and ambassador led. I think that audience specifically are definitely led by their peers, and I think there's like stats that say like 86% of them would rather want to be able to buy from like if they had a recommendation from an influencer instead of a brand. I think also that audience is very savvy about like sponsored posts and the way that the algorithms work a bit more. So I think they wouldn't be that interested, and I think they're more they're more conscious about their data than you would expect as well. So I think it would definitely be a bit more of an ambassador, influencer led campaign, which would then drive down into the channels that they're actually working on. So again, I think Instagram stories, maybe putting in some sort of competition or quiz or something fun, something interesting that we can use with a giveaway, and then kind of rolling it out to that. I think specifically for that audience, you don't really want to do a call out for them because I don't think they are creators in the classic sense. So from like Instagram on the news feed or Facebook on the news feed, that content isn't actually being created as much. I think it's more about when people are doing those short, snappy things, that's what they're consuming, that's what they're creating. So it will be definitely a message to interest them from someone coming out as opposed to getting them to do something as well.
Okay. And what about a channel that doesn't have a lot of traffic? Do you have any tips or tricks in terms of driving organic traffic to that channel?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, that's always a challenge, also if you could talk about it in the B2B space. I think working on your SEO would definitely be one of the biggest tips and tricks. I think it's still one of the biggest drivers out there. I think making sure that you can get everything right, make sure that the content's working. But for instant results, I think you'd want to look at maybe some PPC, some AdWords, and also from like your standard link clicks and Facebook activity. Even from quite a small amount of money, perhaps, or even maybe word of mouth, etc. That would be where you could go. Another area would probably be groups. I think groups is a great untapped potential. I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a weird thing to go into, but if you have a specific niche and you're able to join groups and become an authority on that, I think that is going to be a great way from an organic perspective to drive to a site that's not getting that much traffic.
Very interesting. So I'm going to pick your brain on SEO. How does SEO work on social channels?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of how they complement each other a little bit, I would say. So I think you have from SEO, from the great content that's being generated from, say, like blogs and everything else and all that area. I think it's a way of driving people through to that and then owning the whole journey from an SEO perspective.
Okay.
So I think, there are discussions or there's thoughts about how much you want to have like a link on your social media channels, especially from an organic perspective. But I think if you've got like that metadata right and that all correct when you have your link and it is enticing for people, I think it can actually be supported through social media by drawing that through.
Okay, thank you. And now moving into the last question of this section. Okay. Companies are expected to spend $120 billion on marketing by 2021. So that's only 4 months away. And obviously a big part of this, will be spent on digital marketing and on social media. As a social media expert, can you foresee any trends taking shape in 2021 that we can anticipate now?
I think it's going to be much more video driven. I think whenever we come out of this period, I know we're not allowed to talk about it anymore, but once we come out of that, I think people are going to be wanting to look for those organic connections. And I think people are so much more comfortable on video and talking on video that I think them wanting to have that replicated in advert, in say ads being served to them, that's what they want. I think they'll want to have authentic content inspiring them to kind of have their connections and to kind of connect with their friends, connect with their family more, and just to experience different things and to do whatever they can and do everything. I mean, I was thinking about going to Japan. I'd never been to Japan when I was looking at it, and I thought, well, I can't now, even though like 6 months ago it wasn't a problem. I could have gone. It was just about the cost and everything. So I think people wanting to connect and go out and explore more, that's what people want to do. And from a social media perspective, we can inspire that and help them build those connections. I think through a video platform, I think Reels is going to be really interesting. And it's always fun when they create something which is like other things. I think that's going to be a big part. And I think the way that the written language of like our social content is going to even further drop down, and the way that people can communicate from a global perspective will just be through video content and through that sort of communication, like through dances or whatever that will be. That's where I kind of see it happening.
Okay, very interesting. So I guess we'll have to wait to see what the future has in store for us.
Yes.
Okay, moving into our rapid fire set of questions. Okay. To get this section started off, I'd like to ask you about your source of inspiration. So who do you admire, a professional role model or an influencer?
Okay, I think the first people that I admire is my family. I think, my members of my family do amazing things, and they've done amazing things in the past. And to have some people that can kind of keep you wanting to drive forward, I think that's always a great source of inspiration. I think from more of like a professional perspective, someone I admire very much is Sir Dave Brailsford, who works with one of the cycling teams. It has to come back to sport, but the stuff that he's done, some of the thoughts and insights that he gives about like marginal gains and driving always across, I think that always kind of resonates with me. I think I really like the idea of never ever giving up. Even on a Monday morning, I try to think that, and that like being able to do anything that you want to set your mind to. I think that's what really inspires me.
Okay, so the sky's the limit.
Oh, nice. That's very good.
Gareth, what about a book, a publication, a group, a community, or an event that you'd like to recommend, or even a hashtag?
I think I would like to go more with a book called The Chimp Paradox. So this is a book that kind of helps you understand about yourself, and about it kind of gives you an idea that about taking things personally and not personally, and how people react to different situations. I can't recommend this highly enough. It's about, if you are in, in business situations, I think also from a creative perspective, when you always think your idea is the best, right? Sometimes it isn't always the best idea. And I know that you can sometimes feel, oh my goodness, this is good. Why does everyone hate me? Why is this not working, etc. So that is something that I really helped me allow to kind of like compartmentalize what I'm actually doing, etc. So have a look. It's quite big, but it is worth it. It's very good.
Excellent. And last but not least, what's your favorite app or tool at the moment?
Okay, so I think so. My tool, it would definitely be the tool that we use is the Sprinkler social listening tool. I really love social listening. I think it's really interesting and really exciting. So I'd spend all my time on that, just querying it, looking at different things, and I think it provides a lot of great insight and a lot of great inspiration. For myself personally, apart from like looking at the Garmin Connect app for my runs and everything else, I do think, and I am being sucked very much into TikTok as being my favorite app. I think I really like the idea that you can just scroll through and discover these sort of things. And I think it's actually it's really nice and entertaining. It's still quite fresh and people are doing interesting things. And I actually find some of the stuff quite a source of inspiration as well for how we kind of approach it.
Okay, well, we're going to have to see what happens with TikTok in the US.
Absolutely. It's going to be really interesting. I think this is why Reels is going to be so interesting. I mean, with the stories that happened with Snapchat as well, as when Facebook are moving on to these things, we'll like to see how they can compete. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, the battle of the social media.
Yes.
Okay, Gareth. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix. It was
a pleasure
awesome to meet you, to learn more about Garmin, and to pick your brain on social media.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to everybody listening in today, thanks for joining us on the Content Mix. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out the Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every day, so keep on tuning in. Thanks again. Have a fabulous day and see you next time. Bye.